Hello, everyone. This is Dwayne Monroe, one of the co-hosts, along with R.C. Charles Roberts and Dennis Claxton of the Film Conversations podcast. This is our recording, the first recording for 2026, our recording for March 1st of 2026. And in today's show, we are talking about the classic film noir from 1947, Out of the Past. And I'm going to start by reading from the Wikipedia article about the film. This is from the first paragraph of the Wikipedia article. Out of the Past, billed in the United Kingdom as Build My Gallows High, is a 1947 American film noir directed by Jacques Tourneur and starring Robert Mitchum, Jane Greer, and Kirk Douglas. The film was adapted by Geoffrey Homes from his 1946 novel Build My Gallows High, also written as Homes, with uncredited revisions by Frank Fenton and James M. Cain. Its complex, fatalistic storyline, dark cinematography, and classic femme fatale garnered the film critical acclaim and cult status. In 1991, the National Film Preservation Board at the Library of Congress added Out of the Past to the United States National Film Registry of, quote, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant films, end quote. And that's from Wikipedia. And now I'm also going to read the first paragraph or so of an essay that is in Cinephilia Beyond, which, by the way, links to all this in the show notes. The essay is entitled Out of the Past at 78, the quintessential film noir that launched Robert Mitchum and Kirk Douglas's careers, and that is by Sven Mikulik. 70 years since its release, Out of the Past has long enjoyed an established place in film historians' lectures on the best examples of film noir. Produced by RKO, a company that mainly specialized in the production of B-movies by that time, and every once in a while managed to place an A picture on the market, the project brought together an experienced group consisting of RKO regulars. In the director's chair sat Jacques Tourneur, the son of the renowned French film director and screenwriter Maurice Tourneur, and a filmmaker who made a name for himself by working on films such as Cat People and I Walk with a Zombie. Behind the camera was the excellent cinematographer Nicholas Moroska. I'll have to put that on the screen. Cat People, I Remember Mama, two films that that cinematographer worked on. Under the spotlight were the great Robert Mitchum, at this point at the start of his leading man career, and the very talented Jane Greer. The screenplay was written by Daniel Mainwaring and based on the author's 1946 novel, Build My Gallows High, a successful book Mainwaring published under the pseudonym of Geoffrey Homes. James M. Cain, the hard-boiled fiction writer, and the Wings of Eagle screenwriter, Frank Fenton, did rewrites, and the cast was enriched with another relative newcomer with vast potential, Kirk Douglas. Out of the Past made a modest profit of $90,000 and received none of the Academy Awards nominations, but in time grew in stature, with its once overlooked qualities slowly getting the appreciation they deserved. Today, Jacques Tourneur's Out of the Past is widely considered to be one of the very best film noirs of the 40s, and a definitive, high-quality representative of the genre altogether. Cynical and bitter, fatalistic, and presenting an archetypal hero of film noir in Mitchum's lead character, exhibiting masterful utilization of light and shadows, amplified by an extensive and peculiar use of cigarette smoke, introducing an inescapably destructive femme fatale who attracts men to their demise like moths to a flame. Out of the Past is atmospheric, humorous, and elevated by an extremely talented trio of main actors and actresses. So that ends that introductory reading. And now I'd like to ask my co-host to unmute. I think we're going to start with Dennis, who's been having a few audio problems, but hopefully those are, no pun intended, a thing of the past. Dennis, why don't you start us off with your thoughts, your notes, your impressions of this film, of which I have strong memories of as well.
I wanted to start with something from our friend Mary Wilde's new book. What is it called? I've forgotten the title now. Psychology of Horror or something like that.
Yes, I think
it's essentially what it is I think it's 50 movies she writes about, and I'm going to read some. Possession from 1981, which a lot of the book is her podcast, where she will focus on a movie and then play these excerpts from the movie, which it's a very effective way to do it. She plays these long excerpts of dialogue. So, and I happen to listen to this, and this is the first one of her podcasts I listened to, this movie Possession, and it's a psychological horror drama film. Possession, oblique marriage between an international spy named Mark and his wife Anna, whose behavior grows increasingly disturbing after she asks for a divorce. Zalowski, the filmmaker, wrote the screenplay amid the collapse of his own marriage, stating, quote, "I make films about what is torturing me, and a woman serves here as a medium. I only want to film excessive stories," end quote. And this part is the reason I wanted to read this, because I think it applies to modern artists can wrestle with problematic personal issues. I'm back?
You are back indeed.
So annoying. A space where artists can wrestle with problematic personal issues. Long may that continue. It saddens me that filmmakers today are expected to have no quirks, no messiness. In what scenario, or rather in that scenario, what is cinema even for? Why diminish its potential? Yeah, much like the psychoanalytic analytic setting, film compels us to return to the same ground, circling old wounds, obsessing over things that rationally shouldn't be difficult, yet within the process of repetition, a deeper understanding emerges. I mean, I could go on, but I just wanted to start with that because I think it's a great description of, one of the reasons I watch movies, and like I say, I had listened to that podcast, and, I went through a divorce. It's been some time now, but, as she said, old wounds, when I was listening to that, I was like, my God, this guy was in my house recording me and my ex, as our marriage was disintegrating.
By the way, the full name of the book by Mary Wilde is Psychoanalyzing Horror Cinema.
Yeah, it's really good. Mary's great, and she's I don't know, she's just able to kind of get a laser focus on things that are sometimes difficult to follow.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever read Lacan, for example, yeah. her talking about Lacan is much clearer than Lacan. And she also has these definitions of terms, etc. Anyway, I recommend the book. And I was reading like I said, one of the reasons I watch movies. So getting to Out of the Past, we're always talking about law, and which I think we're going to do more of. And this is considered a classic and all that. But the thing I really like about it is Robert Mitchum. I'm a big Robert Mitchum fan, and people always talk about. You mentioned it earlier, Charles. Some critic had called him a sleepy-eyed something.
Yeah, and that's James A.
Then there's this one scene. Yeah. So there's this one scene you'll remember when Kathy, the femme fatale, kills Robert Mitchum's partner.
Mm-hmm.
They're both like private detectives.
Mm-hmm.
And the way Mitchum looks at her after she shoots the guy, he's not sleepy-eyed at all. He's, he's wide awake, and he's looking at her, and just the way the look in his eye. He's like, you didn't have to kill him. He was just shocked. And that's probably definitely one of my favorite scenes in the movie. So, you know, and I was talking to Charles earlier. I think you were part of it as well. I started reading the book that it's based on, and I was enjoying it until it became just, it's like, okay, stop, you know, this should have been over already.
Yes.
And that's one of the complaints. Robert Mitchum said he didn't like the book because it was too, you know, you get this a lot of times with these kinds of stories, like they're too convoluted. And, you know, because I think, you know, I remember, you know, a writer named Chester Himes?
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So, you know, he started off like a lot of people writing, you know, trying to write the great American novel, as they say, and ended up writing crime stories just because he had to make a living. And he lived in, I believe it was Paris for many years. And he talked one time about how he knew it was time to end it. He said, I would start with a pile of paper on the left-hand side of my typewriter. And when it was almost finished, I would be, okay, I got to end this book. And I think this guy could have used that kind of technique or trick or something, you know. He just kept going. Charles was saying earlier that, you know, it's a thriller, a crime story trying to be a novel, and in a way of, you know, the kind of novel everybody wants to write when they're first starting, of like, you know, that it's going to be a big hit and all that, but with a certain depth. And, you know, the thing about someone like Raymond Chandler or Jim Thompson, who I like a lot, you know, they're just, it's pretty raw. It's pretty close to the bone, the whole thing, you know, but there's a lot of great turns of phrase and just great storytelling. Although Jim Thompson cheated on more than one ending. So, you know, but.
Well, James Cain,
I think, you know, when
the great hard-boiled writer, James Cain, also hated the original book. And I mean, probably a bit of snobbishness on his part as a far stronger writer, but also because, you know, he also reported reading and saying, "My God, what's going on here?" By the way,
yeah, you know,
before we move on, I want to mention that Chester Himes was an African American, and I wanted to let's see. There's something that I found here about him, that he worked for Warner, I believe, for a little while, and was driven out because of racism. Mike Davis in City of Quartz, his great book City of Quartz, Excavating the Future of Los Angeles, describing the prevalence of racism in Hollywood in the 1940s and 50s, cites Himes's brief career as a screenwriter for Warner Brothers, terminated when Jack Warner heard about him and said, "I don't want no N-words on this lot." So anyway, yeah, here was a great novelist who would have written more in this genre, actually, and probably done more on Warner in the film noir category, had he had the chance.
You mentioned the word. You mentioned the word snob. I just want to add here very quickly that I have a rule that most people don't care for, which is I think that the only way for a book to be adapted into a good movie is if it's a bad book. Case in point, a lot of the Hemingway books that got turned into movies, they weren't very good literary books because literature has a very different basis than movies, but they were great movies.
Yeah.
So John Waters said exactly. John Waters said exactly the same thing. He said bad books make good movies, and vice versa. I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule. Yeah, John Waters said that.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's good company to be in, I guess. But I know John Waters and I have a similar enjoyment of H.L. Mencken, so that's a good thing. But yeah,
well, he's from Baltimore, John Waters.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You got two celebrities from Baltimore. But I was going to say that the book is too long. Here, for example, Gore Vidal wrote a series of mystery novels under the name Edward Box Edgar Box, because he's facing discrimination as well for writing City of the Pillar, where Oliver Prescott, I think he was a a book critic for the New York Times, basically blacklisted all Vadal's stuff, so he had to write under a pseudonym, Edgar Box. Those books are very short, but they're very good. And I think a lot of people don't understand that technically a novel doesn't have to be a certain number of pages. What makes a novel is that it's a narrative with characterization, and generally has some kind of animating theme that's a part of it. But it doesn't have to be long, per se. So I feel like this guy was writing this book, and he thought he would make the great American novel, and so he thought it has to be long. It's like you should have cut your losses right about in the middle.
In the book, they go from Northern California, this small town in Northern California, to Los Angeles, to Mexico, to San Francisco. Was it Los Angeles? Anyway, in the book, there's a whole other thing going on in New York, and it's like, man, it's too much.
Right. I've always had a little bit of I guess the rule for me for books has been, if you have a simple plot, you can have complicated characters and complicated events. But if you have a complicated plot, you're going to have simple characters and simple events. Because if the characters are moving around a bunch, you're not going to have a lot of time to get to know them. And that's not always a bad thing, but you got to work it into the novel. But if the characters are going to be somebody that we're going to be spending a lot of time with, one thinks of, Lord Byron's, I always say it wrong. I want to say Child's Pilgrimage. I always say it incorrectly. But like that, or Don Quixote, where you have characters that are very interesting. You spend a lot of time with the characters in the novel, so there isn't a lot that's necessarily going on. They're going to move at their own pace. In the book, which I didn't finish, by the way, I couldn't do it. It was too much, too long. I feel like he tried to have complicated characters and a complicated plot. I don't think it worked.
Have either of you heard of a book called Plotto?
No.
Plotto. I read in an interview with Alfred Hitchcock where he mentioned this book. It's called Plotto, The Master Book of All Plots by William Wallace Cook.
I just actually found it on Wikipedia. Although it's not mentioned as a book.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. It's about tools that generate narrative ideas or fiction, or a plot generator. And
here's the table of contents. Plotto 101, Introduction, Plotto chart. Anyway, it's a conflict situation. Plotto 101. It's just. I just got it. I heard about it a long time ago. I just got it. And Charles was talking about plots, and it's a book. It's a book full of plots. Yes. That's what it is.
Yeah. William Wallace.
I'll speak more about it.
William Wallace Cook, according to this article, first put this together in 1928, and by the way, it was adopted as part of the method that was used to create the earliest computerized story generator, which was called Tailspin, developed in the 1970s, and as recently as the 1990s, a computer program called Mexica was developed for academic research into automated plot generation. So you see, even before the era of Meta, Microsoft, and other villains, people were trying to create software-based plot generation techniques.
Yeah, we're always talking about getting rid of writers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know how much Jack Warner hated writers.
Oh, well, we talk more about the book than the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think you probably know the movie better than anybody, or the three of us, Dwayne.
That may be. I mean, I think because I have a long history with the movie, not as long as the movie's been out, but or since it was created, but a long history. As I was mentioning before we started recording, I first saw the film about 15 years ago or so on Turner Classic Movies Network, in as part of, or rather, as presented by Eddie Muller as part of the Noir Alley series that TCM has. I believe they still have it, because I haven't seen TCM in a while since leaving the U.S. But I could just Google it. But anyway, Muller, who's brilliant at describing noirs and always emphasizes the production, the situation of the production, the plot, the actors, actresses, everything having to do with the business of filmmaking. One of the things that makes his presentation so invaluable. He presented this as like the quintessential, as the essay that I mentioned earlier, as the quintessential noir. And I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I knew that Eddie Muller was a person whose taste I trusted. Because if a movie had great ideas and wasn't that great a movie, he would just tell you. It was like, or if it was historically important, but had some issues as a film, he would tell you. He wasn't the kind of guy gushing over everything just because, oh, it's noir. Oh, there's shadows. So I knew I could trust his taste, or I felt I could trust his taste, but I wasn't really prepared for the impact this film would have upon me. And I remember the first time I viewed it, when we got to the end, and our hero and our anti-hero and our femme fatale are all dead. Everyone's dead. And the one person who knows that Jeff Markham was not in fact a villain, really, is not going to, he's not able to tell. I mean, he could tell, not as if he couldn't write or sign, but he's not going to tell because he doesn't want Markham's heartbroken love to grieve over him. So he wants her to believe that he was in fact this horrible person, so that she can move on. And the world keeps spinning, and it was such an incredibly dark ending, but realistic as well. Because as we were discussing before recording, every day, all day, something horrible happens, and people are just forgotten. They just disappear off the face of the earth, and no one knows their true story. This happens to countless human beings, and it's one of the great mysteries, one of the great tragedies, one of the great heartbreaks of being a human being, that you can have this life, you can have all these ideas, these thoughts, you can be a brilliant person, you can be a dull person, but off you go. Off you go into the void, and people will know nothing about you. But also, as you mentioned, Dennis, Robert Mitchum's characterization, his performance, I should say, really just stayed with me, because he's, Charles was talking about Philip Agee's criticism that he was languid or lazy or whatever, that he was too relaxed. But what I detected even many years ago was that, no, this man was not relaxed at all. This was a man who was trying to stay disciplined on enemy territory. And for him, enemy territory was Earth itself, and this was because of, his involvement in criminality, but also I just got the sense, and I don't want to misuse the word existential because people toss that word around lazily, speaking of lazy, stupidly, and not knowing what they're talking about, because most of us haven't really studied Sartre. But it felt as if Jeff Markham the character portrayed by Mitchum, he had a sense, at least this is what was communicated to me by watching the film. He understood that society itself was not to be trusted. And so he was going to be like a watchful, quiet, guarded, honorable, really, in many ways. Certainly trustworthy. Like, he's not the kind of guy that you could not trust. You know, you definitely could trust him. If he said he was going to do something, there's a good chance he was going. 99% chance he was going to try his best to do it. So actually, a good person, but a good person in a way that Chandler meant when he wrote his essay, "The Simple Art of Murder," in 1952, I believe it was 53, talking about who Philip Marlowe, in his imagination, was. That Marlowe was a decent person, but not a sap. Not a person who believed that people were good. Not a person who, even though he himself strived to be as good as he could be, not a person who took things for granted, and who was always watching, always observing.
One thing I always thought was kind of poignant about Robert Mitchum is, I think that Jarmusch movie was his last movie, Dead Man or something. So I think that was late 90s, maybe. Anyway, Robert Mitchum died.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood icon Robert Mitchum dies. Mm-hmm. And the next day, James Stewart died. So who do you think everybody was talking about? You know, nobody was talking about Mitchum for more than about 12 hours after he died. And then it was just Jimmy Stewart, you know, which I like James Stewart as well. But I mean, that sounds like something that would happen to Robert Mitchum.
Yes, exactly.
The day before James Stewart, and nobody talks about it.
It's your damn luck, right? Yeah. But the movie hit me because, as Charles and I were talking about earlier, the script is so tightly and beautifully written. The dialogue is so marvelous. It's a very mature movie. It's an adult story. You have to be an adult to understand the emotions that are being communicated, whether it's quietly or explicitly. You can't, if you're a child, you're going to be confused about what's going on. And the femme fatale character is, of course, a trope, and it's one that is contradictory. And I'm sure that if we could have a nice conversation with Mary Wilde about the psychosexual elements, and also the role of patriarchy and all sorts of male hang-ups that feed into the femme fatale. But Jane Greer's performance seemed to transcend, to me anyway, a lot of these tropes. Because it wasn't merely that she was like a femme fatale. It wasn't merely that she was, oh, I'm sexy and I just want money. There was something else about her as a human being. Like just something like deeply, epically evil about this person. And it seemed to have less to do with her gender, her sex, than just the essence of this particular person who happened to be poured into the form of a beautiful woman, but could have had any human form, right? And also the fact that Mitchum's character, who's so careful and who's crafted such a life for himself, is only dragged back into the life that he sought to leave, because he, as they say at the moment when they die, it's like they really can't escape each other. And I think that in her own twisted way, he is probably the only person she's ever actually loved. But because she's a psychotic, her vision of love will lead to will lead to everybody getting killed. So yeah, it's
I think you mentioned Eddie Muller earlier,
mm-hmm.
And I told you I'd been reading this book called Dark City Dames, The Wicked Women of Film Noir.
Yeah.
And so there are two chapters about Jane Greer. Mm-hmm. One at the time Out of the Past was made, and then one decades later.
Mm-hmm.
Tourneur? Yeah, I was just going to read from the book.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
How do you pronounce the director's name?
Well,
Tourneur?
Tourneur. Yeah.
Tourneur.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tourneur's obsession with detail did not extend to the actors. The director gave his leading lady, Jane Greer, startlingly simple guidance. Quote, first half, good girl. Second half, bad. This is Jane Greer reporting that's what he told her. And he distilled my character down to a single word, impassive. He also said no big eyes, but I snuck a couple in there anyway. That was all the direction Jane Greer was offered. It was enough.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was something else. And, of course, this book, especially the first chapter when she was younger. God, the way people were treated by these assholes,
Yes.
She was mistreated and abused by Rudy Valley, Howard Hughes, although she found Howard Hughes kind of not dangerous, almost she kind of felt sorry for him, although he treated her poorly,
Yeah.
And he kept her under contract and she wasn't making any movies. He just wanted her in his stable, as it were.
Yeah, that was Howard Hughes, right?
Yeah.
He had the capital to be. I mean, like a Jack Warner would have said, "Well, I have to make money some kind of way," but Hughes would be like, "Well, I have money, so I just want to have a beautiful woman around," and I'm, I can only imagine what she endured.
Didn't Katharine Hepburn hit or slap or something Howard Hughes? I forget what it was. She hit him or she threw something at him or something. I don't remember. It's mentioned.
Well, I know that in the 30s they did have a fairly. I mean, it's the standard story is that during the 1930s, Hughes and Hepburn had a very tempestuous relationship.
It was mentioned in Gore Vidal's palimpsest, but I don't remember the exact. Gore Vidal hated Howard Hughes. I don't know if I hate him. I do have contempt for him. But I thought I'd throw that out there. But continue.
Yeah, he definitely he deserves contempt for a variety of reasons. But yeah.
Where are we on time?
Oh, I'd say we have another 30 minutes or so. Is good.
Because I'm going to turn it mostly over to you guys now, but I wanted to mention one thing. Did you have a chance to read that essay I sent by Charles Scruggs, who I think you're familiar with him, Charles?
I am. He wrote.
You read him?
Agent. I didn't read the essay you sent. I don't think, or I might have. I don't know. I don't.
Well, I just wanted to mention it. I just wanted to mention
I'm aware of his. I'm aware of his book, The Sage in Harlem. But I don't know if I've read the essay. But go ahead.
Well, we were talking about femme fatale, and I think people have an idea that it's, pretty formulaic in terms of you have good girl, bad girl, first half good, second half bad, and you lead someone like Robert Mitchum. Yeah, that was never going to happen. But so anyway, there are lots of different ways to read movies, and this, to me, it's called Charles Scruggs. It was in a journal called African American Review from 2011. And I'll just read the title because it kind of sums up the image of the fugitive slave and out of the past. And I read it, and it's fascinating the way it just talks about the Jane Greer character being owned by Kirk Douglas, and she tries to get away, and Kirk Douglas hires Robert Mitchum, and in this essay, he describes Robert Mitchum as a slave catcher. He and his partner, and I just found that it's just so intriguing. I don't want to take up too much time with it, but I just to think of that
in those terms. Actually, I don't
in those
disagree.
terms.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that because, of course, yeah. And by the way, is this the Charles Scruggs who's a professor at the University of Arizona?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so.
Okay, all right. I only ask because of course, I want to make sure that I capture everything for the show notes. But yeah,
Well,
I can see
that
not.
it's available online, but you have to have a subscription at someone,
Yes.
that JSTOR or something like that.
Yeah.
So someone
Yeah.
sent it to me, so I sent it to you guys.
Yeah.
But there's always the library.
This is true. Yeah, and of course that's a problem with academic publications these days, that they are paywalled, because the billions of endowments that lots of schools have, that's not enough. And there's an entire industry, of course, that locks down publications for like Elsevier and so forth, for profit, which Charles and I were talking about the role of profit in the destruction of literature, or at least the balkanization of literature, or the degradation of literature. Well, all arts really. But before we go down that road, Charles, I wanted to give you a chance to share your thoughts about the film.
Ugh, there's so much to say. I'm going to start with the criticism you guys have hinted at, because I was the one who collected the criticism that was given to these movies, or to this movie, I should say. Basically, generally the first kind of criticism that came out, although it was part of a fairly positive review in Variety, was that people were not entirely sure what genre this fit. We know now, looking back on it, that it's noir. At the time, for example, Variety described it as a hard-boiled melodrama. And there were a few other forms of criticism, basically. For example, Pauline Kael, besides calling it empty trash, give me a second to think about what she called it a suspense melodrama. Which I don't understand.
So struggling, as you said, to find a way to define. And of course, the term film noir, for those who don't know, comes from what French film goers or film reviewers described these movies that were coming out of Hollywood in the post World War II period, because American films, U.S. films, were not accessible in France during the Nazi occupation. They only got whatever Goebbels was putting out from the commandeered UFA and the German film studio. And so what the French film going public had seen prior to World War II were, for example, the glittering, beautiful movies of Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, and other movies that were produced during the Depression period that were trying to portray a lovely alternative universe in which everyone was pretty and everyone was dancing and having a good time. In New York, many people in the glittering 1930s New York, of dreams, and so then the French are cut off from that for the most part because of the German occupation. And then, these films become available, US films become available, Hollywood becomes available once again. And suddenly, what they're getting are these movies that are completely different in tone. Like Out of the Past, for example. And people were like, what happened? And so the term, and I don't know, I'm sure that I can find this and do a little research. I don't know who in the French film scene or the French critical scene, film criticism scene, came up with this term, but the term that was created in France was film noir, to say that these black films that expressed totally different perspective than what they had seen prior to World War II. So with that background, Charles, carry on.
Right. Well, I was going to say there was also accusations that whoever made this movie was copying the French. So it's a very interesting.
Well, they were French.
Well, you see how some criticism is pretty fucking awful. It's as if they didn't do any research.
Yes, exactly.
We have
how familiar is that? We deal with that today.
Say, we're drowning in that now. I mean, I don't even want to talk. I gotta be careful as far as my blood pressure and my state of mind. But yeah, so there were a lot of criticism, and if I'm not mistaken, and I'll have Dwayne correct me if I'm wrong, this movie came out when noir maybe wasn't a defined genre yet. So watching the critics try to figure out what it is very interesting, because basically they thought it was a blending of genres. And at the time, I think that was looked down on. But the reason I want to start from the criticism is that I hesitate to say this because of the way we make books and movies nowadays, but a trope is only as good as how you use it. Because in my opinion, in every art, there's usually a stock number of tropes and maybe not ideas. Ideas shouldn't be limited, but usually tropes. And there's only so many ways you can use a medium. Let's put it that way. And so in any film, any book, any medium, there are a certain number of tropes that are going to get used. I think the femme fatale is one of those tropes. Now, what I think is interesting about Out of the Past, as opposed to other ways that femme fatale has been used, is this. At the very center of the kind of masculinity that exists in the United States, there is one very solid thing that most men agree with, which is they think that all women are the same. Absolutely cannot imagine that one woman is different from another. There's, and it's funny because then if a woman says something about men, someone goes, well, not all men. It's like, oh, like, so you don't like it when it happens to you, but you'll see articles and videos of, oh, this is how you can get any woman to date you. It's like I don't know.
Right.
But what I like about Out of the Past with the femme fatale is I'm going to say her name wrong. I think Jane Greer, is that?
Yes,
okay,
that's
good.
correct.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Her character, I think, is enormously complicated. That's what makes her being evil believable. Because what people don't get, especially nowadays in this Marvel Disney world of ours, is that evil is supposed to be complicated. Now, evil isn't, we're going to do a movie about Cruella de Vil from her perspective, where we make you feel bad because she had a mildly inconvenient childhood. But
that's really all modern screenwriters seem to have, right?
Yeah,
My dad didn't like me.
Right.
Therefore, I don't know, I want to rule the world.
Exactly. And so with Kathy in this movie, she's very complicated. Because like you were saying, there's a bunch of different things going on. First off, it is my belief, and I got this from the British philosopher John Gray, but I believe that all human beings tend to have a kind of a contradictory aspect to themselves. It's just we have so many different desires that are, base desires, higher desires, that they are bound to conflict. especially just the way humans live. It exists in other animals too.
And of course, Freud said the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's definitely very well embedded in psychoanalytic literature. But with that being said, the way we act in the world means that we're going to have a bunch of different desires. Some of them are going to conflict with each other. And so you're pointing out that, Kathy probably loved the main character whose name escapes me. I'm sorry. I have a memory of a goldfish. Jeff Bailey.
Jeff.
Mm-hmm. Jeff. She probably loved him. And it certainly seems that way. It seems that that's what's indicated. Mm-hmm. But she was also having to, look out for herself. Mm-hmm. I mean, what one of the things that I liked about this movie is it takes the motivations and the desires of the characters and puts them up against very specific constraints. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Jean-Paul Sartre earlier. And one of the criticisms of his philosophy is that basically he thought humans were like movie characters, where our freedom is only pronounced when we are in major, dire situations where we have to make choices. That's kind of what his philosophy is. And in movies, that is what happens because you have to flesh out the character. In this case, one of the things I like about the dialogue is that it both contributes to the plot, but it also contributes to you understanding the character.
Yes.
And so with all of this together, what you see, for example, I don't think Kathy's character at bottom is evil. I think she has to do certain evil things to survive. And it is something. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when she first encounters, or he encounters her, I guess he's looking for her, and she knows he's looking for her. Why else would he be there?
Exactly.
So the tension is there. The tension is there from the beginning, and she knows that he is supposed to take her back to Kirk Douglas. Witt, I think, is his name.
Witt.
So
that's the character's name.
That's how they meet. Is a little cantina in Mexico, and she knows why he's there. I think it was actually talking about production. It was actually in Malibu, but you believe it's Mexico.
And by the way, that gets us to the importance. That gets us to the role that Mexico has long played in U.S. filmmaking. It's always this other world that people run to, right? Like and I mean this was before the 1940s, but I think it kind of reached its the form that it still has today in the 1940s, where. I think in the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, for example, let's go to Mexico to make my fortune, or everyone's running off to Mexico. Mexico, it's not even like it's a country; it's just a place for white folks to run to.
I mean, it makes me think of Ambrose. Makes me think of Ambrose Bierce, who went down to Mexico for whatever reason it was, and he got shot. Where he died, we don't know how, and we don't know where, but he definitely died.
Well, it's also a place where William S. Burroughs got away with murder, or got away with homicide.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you were talking about dialogue earlier, Charles. There was. I was just going to make a comment about you were talking about dialogue, and one of the in that essay was talking about with the Out of the Black Past. One of the things that the guy talks about is the meeting, very briefly, with that couple in the nightclub in Harlem. She knows Kathy. She knows why she's running away, and she tries to protect her by telling Robert Mitchum that she's going to Florida. But she had also mentioned in the conversation that she got sick from a vaccination. So Robert Mitchum there's a lot of voiceover. And so Robert Mitchum is, after that encounter, the voiceover says, so he goes to Mexico and he finds her. So there's the private detective part, and also just the patter. You always got to have a little bit of that patter.
Yeah.
And instead of saying something like, oh, I don't know, like, I didn't believe she was going to Florida. He just says, you don't need a vaccination to go to Florida. Which, that's the way you say things in these movies.
Right.
Right.
Great dialogue, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have at least in my opinion, most modern movies have a very see Jane run kind of dialogue where the characters almost have to put their opinions and thoughts on a t-shirt and wear it so that the audience can understand. Although I've always thought that audiences will usually meet the level at which your movie goes for. Maybe not everybody, but you'll find an audience as opposed to followers, which is what I think movies are looking for now. But anyway, for the movie is deliciously complicated, and I think that this is why I bring up tropes, because every medium has its tropes, the things that it does and doesn't do. It matters about how you complicate those. It matters how you take those and, for example, maybe Kathy is evil, but what we see is that her evil is just a little lower than social morality, the societal morality, because she's trying to survive. And this guy, the only reason this guy won't take her in is because he's fallen in love with her. Which in and of itself, you have to ask questions. It's like, okay, so it's because he loves her. That's not it's not a very good reason. I mean, you would think that you want to do it because kidnapping a human being and taking them someplace they don't want to go is probably not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, there's no, the heroism of noir films, at least the good one, I think, is the attempt by characters to rise above not only their own problem.
That's exactly right. It's not in succeeding.
Yeah.
It's in trying.
Right.
It's in trying.
And and I think that makes the femme fatale trope, I think it makes it better. It makes it work because she's not fatal. I'll put it this way: a lot of femme fatale that I've seen tends to essentialize that women are these dangerous creatures, and if you give in to them, you'll be destroyed. It's kind of like the sirens in Greek mythology, which there's a parallel in this movie, sort of.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's not because she's a woman. It's because of the situation. She doesn't want to go to a place she doesn't want to be at, and then she ends up being in the place under duress. And
because Whit, the man who sent Jeff Markham to find her, he's a far greater evil.
Yes.
Because he wants to possess and control.
Right.
And Kathy simply wants to survive. And indeed, I think you make a really important point here, because in other in lesser portrayals of the femme fatale character, the femme fatale goes after some sucker of a guy, and says, "Oh well, this guy has access to money, and I will therefore, use my legs or whatever to get him to do my bidding." Because as you say, there's this idea that that's just what women do.
Yeah.
But here, if you don't bother Kathy, Kathy's not going to bother you. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's I think in a lot of femme fatale, men are presented as this perhaps stupid, perhaps naive, but nonetheless an alloyed good person. Just a good guy, pays his bills,
yes,
kisses babies, whatever. And this woman is this dangerous whatever. But in Out of the Past, they've all got issues. They've
Yes,
all have
everyone
done
does.
things that
Yes.
are not good. But I think, it is better to have, if you're going to have femme fatale, it shouldn't be that the woman is evil. It should be that it's complicated, which is, I think,
Mm-hmm.
what is done in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Wit is definitely evil.
Yes.
He's kidnapping people. That's
Yes.
definitely evil. So, that's what I enjoyed about this is
Mm-hmm.
is the tragedy. I'll put it this way: in T.H. White's magnificent 5-book series, The Once and Future King, there's a quote in there, and I don't remember exactly who said it or when, but it's explained that in tragedy, the what makes a tragedy tragic is that innocence is not enough,
Mm-hmm.
and the love that Kathy and Jeff share isn't innocent in the sense of like it's not adult, but it's innocent in the sense that they thought, hey, we're in love and we can go have happily ever
Mm-hmm.
after if we run away.
That's
And
right.
it's not true, because
That's right.
evil doesn't sleep. So
That's exactly right.
and that's the major tragedy, and that's the fatality in femme fatale, in my opinion, in this movie is not that she's evil. She doesn't lead him astray. It's that they both buy in to something that is legitimately a better world, which is that if you love each other, it's enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It falls apart. And they end up having to, and this is what I was getting at referencing Sartre and the characters, is they end up being unable to overcome what the world is. And then they have to adapt to the way the world is.
And that's what makes this the quintessential noir, because in the very best noir films, and DOA is another example of this, and it's a far simpler movie, but it still communicates this.
Right.
This idea that the issue that you're facing is the structure of the world itself, right? Like the world that we are forced to live in, which human created. It's not because of nature per se, but some, the and really capitalism, because many of these films, in some of them to greater or lesser extents, are in whether in either an explicit or implicit way a bit anti-capitalist, but not in the Marxian sense of a fully developed framework, but in the idea that, well, why are people doing these things? Why are we in this situation? So, but yeah, you're exactly right.
So, but yeah, that's what's great about this movie is it's complicated, and I've always believed that the point of art is the expression of our condition. Sorry. How do I put this? Basically, art is always about expression. It's the expression of something. It's the expression of ideas. It's the expression of our condition. You're expressing something. And what's great about noir movies in general is that there is an expression of our condition, but it's not solipsistic. Because there's a lot of movies or TV shows even, or even the better sitcoms that will express the condition of life, but it's very solipsistic. It's very just your problems. It doesn't consider the world. I mean, think of the number of sitcoms where bad things happen, and bad things do happen, but they get out of it, with some kind of zany event, which is what which is what sitcoms are for. But
or even something more serious like Ozark. Ozark is filmed from a cinematographic point of view, I suppose you could say, as if it were like a modern noir, right? And I'm referring, for those who don't know, to the Jason Bateman produced series for Netflix a few years ago, in which a suburban family from Chicago finds themselves in the Ozarks and they get involved in the drug trade. It continues the tradition that I think started with Weeds, of like, middle class or upper middle class white person enters the drug trade, and those characters should all be dead. But because that series, despite its qualities, does not take into account the entire world that these people are in, that they immerse themselves into, which would have gotten them all killed, including the children, maybe even the dog if they had one. That it doesn't take that into account, and so in almost a sitcom-like way, they escape their fate, even though it's communicated somehow that, like, oh well, their marriage isn't that good or the kids are messed up. Yeah, but they're alive, and they shouldn't be, because of the world that they put themselves into and the people who they angered. And in a noir, in a true noir, they would all be dead.
Right. And I mean, like Laura Linney, who
Yes.
I think does a very good job.
Yeah.
There's a part where she has to meet with a state representative.
Mm-hmm.
And that conversation lasts a whole 8 minutes, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And she just convinces him by saying, oh, what was it? Something like she'll give him a certain amount of money if he'll do whatever.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's like, no, it's like, he's not going to do that. First off, this random middle-class lady offering money.
Yeah.
he might take the money, but he's probably going to ask questions. He's going to try to figure out where it's coming from. Or like when they have that whole literal drug war with the farmer people who are making opium or whatever.
Yeah.
They should have died. They should have died.
Yes.
They should have been arrested.
Yes. And the reason that I brought it up, and I think, and the reason that you've carried the ball forward, is because that's an example of a modern production under current filmmaking conditions that borrows from noir, thematically, stylistically, and so forth. And Jason Bateman and Laura Linney are great performers, and so you're drawn into the story. Much of the writing was actually quite good, and yet it's off because, as you say, the writers are the characters are put into situations that structurally should have meant their doom, and it did not, because in storytelling in the post noir period, the post classic noir period, Hollywood, and whatever Hollywood is now, but certainly by the 1950s, say the late 1950s and into the 60s, there was an abandonment of the hard edge, because people wanted, I guess, a different kind of story. Now, by the late 1960s into the 70s, you did sort of get like a neo-noir, because, of course, the economy had turned sour, the Vietnam War was raging, and so there were similar factors in the political economy of the United States that led to filmmakers, making films like Midnight Cowboy, for example, or Taxi Driver. I mean, these are films that I think can be considered neo-noirs.
Right.
Chinatown, absolutely. But then you get Star Wars, and pretty much all that's destroyed. It's all wiped out.
Well,
now we have to have blockbusters.
I was gonna say, like, I think what probably happened is you have kind of the 1930s, I'd say probably until the 1950s, you have kind of the classical cinema as it develops and it moves away from just filmed conflict to attempts to tell stories. From the 50s to the 70s, I'd say right in that area, you start to see them, I'd call it commercialize it. They're trying to kind of make it a little bit easier to sell. The 70s, you see a reversion from commercial to, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the new wave with Scorsese and
Yeah. I don't know if they were calling it new wave at the time, but certainly, and one of the things I think Ebert wrote about this, that the studio system had collapsed, and that created a space.
Right.
That created a space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes me think of like William Friedkin, for example, came to prominence during that time. But from the 1980s, I think film and art, like paintings, kind of had a similar trajectory where it was no longer, it wasn't about creating narratives, and it wasn't about commercialism anymore. It was about consumerism. Where it's what I would say is the 1980s ushered in franchise movies. The franchising of things. And then the franchising starts to peter out because you can only do so many extra movies, because every movie had a sequel, and every sequel had a third movie, and it just went on and on. And then once you run out of gas for that, because you can only do something so many times, and neoliberalism starts to balkanize different aspects of the film industry, what you start to do is you start to feed on nostalgia, because there's nothing there. Basically, now not all parts of the film industry, I don't think, went through the same issues at the same time. For example, I think a lot of cartoon shows, which is funny, it was prescient for what we have now, what we now have. But you'd have a lot of like cartoon shows that did pretty well. Like there's the Batman cartoons in the 1990s that were pretty good. They're not film, they're not cinema, but they're good. Anyway, so all of this breaks down to where we're at now, where we had remixes. Is what I call them, remakes, whatever, but they're remixes, where you're redoing stuff, you're recycling everything. I don't know where we're headed next, unfortunately.
I don't know, but I do think that with the tech industry takeover of the film industry and their attempt to automate it, essentially, they can't do it, but they're going to try anyway, because they're well, you said it, evil never sleeps. Their attempt is enough to do damage. And I think the only hope for the future of filmmaking in the United States is that it will collapse as an industry. But there's still filmmaking technology, which might even be, maybe you can't get a Panaflex, but you will have like a phone. You'll have something. People will still have the urge to tell stories. But it will mean a balkanization into, smaller venues and so forth, and things that people will somehow view some kind of way. And then the mainstream, whatever the mainstream will be, I think will be just terrible. It'll just be cartoon, basically, computer generated cartoons that are purported to be real. Or if they can't afford to do that anymore because, data center costs are too high, they'll just, have like really terrible scripts. And we've already seen this, like with Netflix. I mean, if you have a Netflix subscription, you have access to quite literally hundreds of films that are nothing. It's a vast library of nothing. And when people first signed on for Netflix, I don't know, 15 years, but however long ago it was, quite some time ago. Well, not quite some time, but long enough ago. You had access to a lot of films, but there were wise people who said, well, if it's streaming and you don't own it, they can change their mind. And that's what's happened. And so people have been cut off from the history of film. I mentioned TCM a lot when we record, because what it provided was a genuine education. As I mentioned to you, Charles, I can instantly recognize like a 1930s film, US, 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I can just take a look at the lighting, the way the camera's moving, the way, not just the way people are dressed. I mean, that's obvious, but there's just certain tells. But that's because of the education I received via TCM, which I think is the equivalent of a film school education in many ways if you're paying attention. Well, a Netflix deprives you of access to film history. And this is also the failure. This also shows just how terrible a system capitalism is, because technically, there's nothing to prevent us from having a beautiful library accessible from anywhere for anybody to see the entire history of world cinema. But we can't. But it's not available to us.
All right. Well, I was going to say, to kind of, summarize all this, movies are going through what writing went through and what painting before it went through, which is this. You have the medium, writing, making films, things like that. And then you have the way that medium is used. Painting is now, before it was kind of this, it became a money laundering thing in the 80s. For writing, you have the word processor now. And then films, now you have this stupid AI slop making movies specifically so that their content can be turned into memes as opposed to telling us a story.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing is you're seeing the medium being cannibalized by the technology that is used to control. This is actually something that I don't know if it's exactly in a Brave New World, but if you read Brave New World in a certain way, it is suggested that the medicine that we receive and then the technology that we use is going to be structured in a particular way in order to, because it's hard to control a medium unless you control how that medium gets expressed. Yeah. So, think of people who write on say Substack or WordPress, or it's become a place to post. There isn't an article. There isn't an essay. You're not writing about something in order to express an idea. You're posting. And that's because with the word processor, which has become kind of this computer hooked up to the various different quote unquote outlets, how you write is controlled by kind of the way that the writing is presented. It's a lot to explain it. It's kind of an aesthetic thing that goes into how technology works. But our mediums are being cannibalized by the technology they use, because the technology we're using to express those mediums is subpar. And not only is it subpar, it's subpar on purpose.
On purpose, yes.
Yes, on purpose, because it's to think of it this way, where commercialism has become consumerism. The reason it has become that way, not saying that commercialism is good, it's just a little bit better than consumerism. Consumerism is based on everything being mass produced, everything being mass culture, mass society, all that stuff. And so the technology that we use to express ourselves is explicitly to make sure that if somebody wants to do something interesting or original or unique, or in our case, educated by the history of the medium that they're using, it can't. It can't, because they want you to post it. They want you to be influencers. They want you to hold streams.
Yes.
And so it gets very frustrating for everybody, because now movies are, you know, they're direct for influencers with a press release. That's what they are.
Yeah, and they disappear rather quickly.
Oh,
at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have like a full court press. But you know what? We've been talking for a while. Dennis, you've been quiet. Is that because of your? And we're also on time. Dennis, before we close out, I know that your internet connection has been shaky.
It's been, I think it's been okay for the last little while.
Okay.
So,
well, then, before we close out, any parting words from you?
Actually, I do. I had I meant to read this earlier, and this fits in with the femme fatale discussion. This is from Mary's book again, Mary Wilde. So this is again from Mary's book, and like I was saying earlier, she's able to sort of get to the heart of kind of things that a lot of people kind of tangle up. So this is from the book. The repression of women's disruptive ecstasy serves to uphold the phallocentric order, disavowing female erotic autonomy and consigning it to the realm of the unspeakable ambivalence towards female pleasure, oscillating between fascination and fear, attraction and repulsion. And I got it kind of backwards. This comes before. Unlike phallic jouissance, which is structured by limitation, rising and falling, presence and absence, feminine jouissance exists as a surplus, eluding symbolic containment. This excess renders it both intoxicating and perilous, positioning female sexuality in a paradox, desired for its transgressive pleasure, yet demonized for the same reason. Nowhere is this contradiction more evident than in the figure of the femme fatale, at once a figure of seductive power and a harbinger of castration anxiety, condemned for representing an eroticism that cannot be possessed or subdued. And Charles, you were saying earlier that about thinking all women are alike, thinking that they are both seductive and dangerous in terms of castration anxiety.
Yeah.
And so there was other stuff that I wanted to talk about, but I think I'll save it for another program because, we're talking about dangerous women. But here's something that I found from that Isabel Millar shared on Instagram. It's a quote from a historian, Federici. Quote, violence against women is a key element in this new global war, not only because of the horror it evokes or the messages it sends, but because of what women represent in their capacity to keep their communities together, and equally important, to defend non-commercial conceptions of security and wealth. And this woman a few years ago wrote a book, I think it was a collection of essays, but it was, who's the character in The Tempest? Calibri, is it? Calibri. But anyway, it's about witchcraft. And she just talks.
Caliban.
How many women were killed? Caliban. Yeah. She talks about how many women were killed. I mean, everybody knows about the Salem witch trials, right? Which, I mean, we're talking decades.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still going on in some places.
Yes, exactly. And there's a reason why, the imperialists attack, communities, and that typically means attacking mothers, attacking women in general, right? Attacking children, because the center of a vision of human gathering that has nothing to do with profit, right? It's just just people coming together in community, for other reasons.
Yeah. And she ties it in with what's called the transition from feudalism to capitalism, which is generally people talk about enclosures of the commons, things like that. But she talks about how women needed to be controlled for reproduction of labor.
Yes.
Basically.
Well, as the old Marxists would say, it is no accident. The many things that we take to be, sort of random or accidents of history, Not everything, of course, is the result. Not everything is the result of people's planning, but many things are that we don't credit. Now,
Yeah, she talks about Marx and feminism in ways that says, okay, here's what both leave out of this question, and then proceeds to write an entire thing about this witchcraft. I've just gotten into the book, so we should probably save it for another time. Well,
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, because it sounds as if it's worth diving into on its own, and also Mary's book as well. I think that I'll reach out to Mary to see if she's interested in coming on and talking about it, because she mentioned writing that book the last time she was on here, and I think it would be good to revisit that as well. Oh, what was your? Charles, go ahead and say that.
I was trying not to jump in and make this any longer or anything. But what Dennis was talking about with the enclosures and everything, it makes me think of Carl Polanyi talked about how the cruelest joke in liberal capitalism is the equality that it supposedly aspires to, because basically liberal equality, and I'll bring this back to what the other thing Dennis said, but liberal equality is making sure everybody's in the market. So everybody can be exploited, basically. And it's a cruel joke because basically Polanyi noted how when capitalism was first enforced in England, basically by the powers that be, one of the main things they did was they would talk a big game about women staying home, but they would also encourage women to be used as underpaid labor for a variety of different industries, because basically they punished women who had to work by saying, well, if you can't do the quote unquote Christian thing and stay at home, we're going to pay you a lot less for dangerous conditions. And I think,
and stay home and we'll pay you nothing.
Right, exactly. Right. And I forget, there was some textile mill. I forget where it was. But it was a place where a lot of women were working, and I think it burnt up. It caught fire. So it was in England. It caused a major, one of the first major
of the Triangle Shirt Factory fire in New York. I believe.
Well, I maybe.
I mean, but although I'm sure there were many.
Well, I'm trying to think of. Polanyi was talking about one of the first major reactions to capitalism in England was that there was some place. Maybe it wasn't a textile mill. I forget where it was, but there was some major tragedy, and a lot of the people who died were women.
Yes,
because they were there working, underpaid labor, and people at the time still had, they were still in touch with kind of the social rules that had existed before capitalism started upending everything. And there was a major response. Now it didn't work because what the bills they were protesting went through anyway, and they closed the enclosures and all this other stuff. But yeah, it just made me think of the Polanyi pointing out the fact that equality for liberals is a cruel joke, for sure.
Yeah, I just found something here. You know how it doesn't matter what you enter when you're searching for something. The first thing you get is AI, and then you get a movie. You're looking for a definition of a word, and you get a movie that is titled with that word.
Yes, it's a mess.
Anyway, so here's an AI thing. Researchers linking to the Oxford academic article have explored the relationship between Carl Polanyi's critique of market societies and the literal and metaphorical fire of 19th century capitalism. That regulated environments that were crowded, wooden, speculative, prone to destruction. So yeah, there were probably many of those.
Yes.
fires.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's connected with I think his name's Robert Owen. He was one of the first people to he and God, I know his last name's Godwin. I forget his first name. He was the father of Mary Shelley. And I think he was married to Mary Wollstonecraft. But a lot of the romantic figures at the time, and this is scrubbed from our books, were very much against the capitalism that was emerging at the time. That's where a lot of romanticism.
There was all kinds of resistance. Yes, there were all kinds of resistance to capitalism.
So and I think Robert Owens was the one who was most motivated by because I think it was a series of horrible things that took place because of the way capitalism, the way capitalism does things. And he wasn't the only movement, obviously, but he was very motivated to try to stop it. Unfortunately, it didn't work. But that's what Dennis was talking about. That's what that made me think of.
Well, we've gone far afield from the movie.
Right,
however,
sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine because the movie itself is what inspired us to go far afield, right? Because as you said, Charles, there's so much to chew on here and so much to think about that it does take you down a variety of avenues. But it's late here where I am, and I want to say it's past my bedtime, but it's past my bedtime. Not really, but really. And so I will bid our listeners adieu, and my co-hosts adieu until the next time. And by the way, everybody, we have pledged, the three of us, to have a more consistent schedule for 2026 on a monthly basis. Thereabouts. By thereabouts, I mean not we'll skip a month. I mean that it may not be exactly on the same day of the month, but once a month you should get a new program. And also, what I will do is record kind of a teaser to let people know what's coming up. So in between times, in between episodes, you'll have an idea of what to expect. And on that note, I bid adieu, as I said, to my co-hosts and to our audience. So for Film Conversations, I'm Dwayne Monroe, saying goodbye. Gentlemen, you can say goodbye too.
Oh, adios. Yeah. Adios, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Until next time.